Now calling to order the Thursday, May 26, 2022 Mashb Conservation Commission meeting. Is there anyone in the audience who has business that is not on this agenda? Lynn, please come forward, state your name for the record, and be heard.
I take it back. It is on the agenda. Never mind.
Oh. No worries. We'll hear from you when we get to it then. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Drew, if you could guide us through the pre- and post-hearing agenda.
Sure. So the first item up is the New England Mountain Biking Club, and I have Lev Malikoff here tonight. This was on the last meeting's agenda, just as a heads up for the presentation, which you'll hear tonight, for some amendments to the existing trail system at the Mashb River Woodlands North parcel. And I'll hand it over to Lev to describe the project and get your take on it.
Yeah, hello everybody. I think I last saw you on Zoom, maybe almost like a couple years ago. We were working on a project south of here, connecting up the trail network. So I'm here representing the Cape Cod chapter of the New England Mountain Bike Association. I'm one of the vice presidents. And we're very interested in helping the Pathways network on Cape Cod connect and grow and become safer and more friendly to users. I should say we're not just interested in developing mountain bike networks. That's probably our greatest interest, but also other users as well, because we share the trails with everyone. And myself, I'm an avid walker, hiker as well. So whenever we design a trail, we try to keep that in mind, that there'll be different types of users that will enjoy them. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with this area at the Quiniquisette Avenue parking lot. There's a staircase. I guess the pictures there show some of the eroded conditions. Since those pictures were taken, it's become much worse. The timbers are starting to fall away and themselves become a hazard. It's very difficult for me just to walk down this hill if it's wet or icy in the off season. So we've been out here. We went out with Drew, I guess it was last couple weeks ago, to see if we could ameliorate this situation somehow by working with the land to create a switchback so that folks wouldn't be going straight up a steep hill, which itself would then become a problem area with erosion. And it seems like we did find a pretty good part of the topography over to that section that you see with the green line. So the red line, a couple X's there, that's the existing pathway, and we would actually probably throw some brush on those couple X's and then trim out the area that you see in green. So as you're coming from the north to climb the hill up to the parking area, you would travel in this kind of S-shaped pathway and then onto the existing gravel road. There's no need to go up the stairs once this project will be completed, because you could travel the gravel road all the way to a connection there where Drew is showing with the arrow. So the pathway network is in pretty good alignment there for people to get around. It's just that this is I think a hazard and a problem area. So we have some very able, agile, and capable volunteers that have the equipment. We have insurance that covers any liability. As part of one of our trail care events, we would be using hedge trimmers, probably just a regular mower that we've been taking care of, to get through some of the stems and briars. There wouldn't be any tree removal. I don't think there's even any saplings here. It's really just the brush, trimming out the brush and then creating a pathway surface that, again, with the mower and probably a leaf blower, just to get it, down to the stems of the briars. I don't see, with the number of volunteers I can mobilize, I think we could be done with this in two and a half hours of work. you know, probably on a weekday morning sometime when, you know, retired persons such as myself are always looking to do a service project like this. Any questions?
The trail you made previously inside Mashb River Woodlands was done superbly, and it's really wonderful to have more stewards of our resources looking after the woodlands and actively using it. I think your organization represents one of the more desirable people would like to be involved with when it comes to maintaining our conservation lands.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions from our commissioners?
I would just echo some of those sentiments and say that, you know, we're really happy to have you as users of the trail and your expertise to help out with us, because any work that I've done or seen you guys do in the past has always been excellent and way faster done than I ever expected to be done. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I had recommended, because when I presented this at the last meeting, I wanted to try and figure out what the best way to present this was. And so my recommendation was to have Lev come in through an administrative approval process. It's the trail system, as you can see here, the red dashed line is the existing trail, the green is proposed, and then the cross hatching is where we'll have stairways eventually built over the existing path. But it is riverfront, it's in the outer riparian zone, but considering that this is actually not only going to improve access from a safety standpoint, but also alleviate some pretty bad runoff that's happening here down this slope. And you get a lot of accreted sediments down towards the bottom and close to this wetland here. So in the interest of improving the existing conditions, improving safety and environmental conditions, that's why I would recommend administrative approval. So it still involved a roll call vote, but I just wanted to make sure you were all comfortable with that approach.
Thank you, Drew. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this item? Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion that we endorse the plan of the New England Mountain Biking Association to construct the proposed trail and repairs.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Is there any discussion? Now voting. Tom?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lev.
Okay.
Thank you.
First. Do the first. If you want, I wasn't sure how long it was going to take, so we're already past the time for the first.
As well knock it out. It's on the agenda.
Okay.
All right, every year, this commission makes it a point to look at who wants to be involved as an officer and who would like to continue or who would like to relinquish their roles. So we'll make this quick so we can go to the hearings. I think it's important that every so many years we look at who has been leading. I think that the strengths and the weaknesses of each leader can tend to become amplified the longer they stay in office, and often become systemic within the institution the person is managing, governing, or leading. So that having said, I'd like to hear what people's thoughts are on this.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to thank you for going that extra year. I know we did not reorganize last year because of COVID and all the Zoom meetings and everything else, and you did a wonderful job being adaptable and trying to get us going and keep us going. And I'd be more than happy to put my name forward for any position that is available tonight. Having, you know, a background and expertise in the area, I'm retired. I have plenty of free time during the workday. If Drew were to need a commissioner, I'd be right there. So I'm more than willing to offer my services.
Well, if you know, you certainly have the experience, and we've benefited from your advice on this commission already. If you have an interest in chairman, I am happy to become something else.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also be considered as chair, to move up to chairman or vice chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Anything else you want to say towards it?
Well, as you know, I've been here for 30 years, and my background also is in biology. I spent almost 6 years on and off in South America and Central America doing biocontrol. So I'm also been very involved in permitting for 30 years, environmental permitting. And I feel my expertise could be used for a period of time, and then someone else could come up after a period of time when I would be chairman.
Outstanding. Thank you, Tom. So, Drew, what's the proper protocol where we've got two interested parties?
That's a good question. I think you. Huh?
Arm wrestle.
He's younger than I am.
I would assume you would take a roll call vote for each, with the commissioners present tonight. In the absence of that, I wouldn't know what else to suggest. I'm just not familiar with that scenario. More than one candidate is interested in a particular position. That would be my best recommendation.
Okay, and then in order of interest expressed, take the votes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll make the motions for both people that are interested, just as a matter of organization. So first, I'll motion to elect Paul Colombo, the new chairman of this commission. Voting, Tom.
Oh, well, I don't know how this
You can,
this seems odd.
speak your piece. If you got more to say, don't let me steamroll over it.
Well, I'm interested, so I would say, I don't know whether it's an abstain or,
I can get clarification on this if the commission wants to hold off. Plus, we don't have a full quorum either.
I would recommend that.
Yeah, because
Steve Cook is not here.
Steve Cook's not here, Brian Whedon's not here, so I think it would be just in, for this type of vote, it would be best to have a full quorum present. That would be my recommendation.
Very well, then
can
we'll table this discussion, and in that case, we will continue with the hearing items. Move to the 6 o'clock hearing for David M. and Anna S. Ferris, 36 Secaucet Point Road, proposed dredging and expansion modification of pier, ramp, and float. The representative is Cape and Islands Engineering. This is an NOI.
Good evening, Mark Dibb, civil engineer with Cape and Islands Engineering. The project tonight is at 36 Secaucet Point. It's the property highlighted in green on the screen. To the west is Secaucet Point Road. To the east is Little River. And north and south are existing dwellings. The resource areas on site, we have going from the house down, we have the house, a BVW, a salt marsh, and then we go to the land under ocean and land containing shellfish, as well as some land subject to coastal storm flowage. We originally submitted a good month or two ago, went through a couple continuances. We received, the initial submittal included a dock extension, a 8x50 float, as well as a 3,700 square foot dredge to get to a depth of 5 feet. And we did receive some comments from Shellfish Constable regarding shellfish and a sponge in the area that is being analyzed through Woods Hole Group. And his recommendation was to not allow dredging of this area, as well, the float being large. So we took some time after receiving those comments to address the needs of our client and some potential options to modify the proposal. We also arranged a site visit between the homeowner, myself, Drew, and Donovan. That just happened Tuesday. And as a result of that meeting, we've revised the scope of the project. So the scope now, essentially, it does have, we are proposing to extend the pier approximately 16 feet out the same direction and length as that the float is going, and then we're gonna just turn the existing float, an existing 6 by 24 foot float, at the same length out as the end of the existing float. So you'll just see it now looks like an L. It's in the same footprint, except where the turn is, and we're not going any further out into Little River. And the dredge has been completely removed from the project. What this now does is puts the boat in depths of at mean low water over 3 feet, 4 feet. We even just happened to, at the site visit, Donovan called over a patrol boat and they took some measurements. We had 5 or 6 feet of water at the end of this pier when the boat came by. So the site visit was very useful for all the parties involved, and the owner got to hear the comments specifically from the Shellfish Constable and Drew. And basically, so we resubmitted, just that meeting happened Tuesday. We did just resubmit this morning, so we understand, you know, we don't necessarily have a lot of feedback, but I'd like to hand it over to Drew at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Drew, comments?
So yeah, I wanted to at least have the discussion on what the most recent changes were to the project, as Mark had just detailed. And yeah, because the plan was submitted, you know, inside the 5 days, it's probably, what I would recommend is a continuance, just to allow for any additional public feedback, give the public a chance to, if there's anyone interested in looking at the plans, just because there hasn't been much time, but at least use this opportunity if there's any questions the commissioners have. Marine Fisheries submitted a letter, but it was based on the original proposal, and they had issues with the dredge and the float size. So both of those have been addressed in this modification, this most recent revision of the plan and project. And as Mark had said, Donovan had issues with the dredge because of this invasive sponge that he actually pointed out. You could see it in the area. And dredging, you know, would result in a likelihood of spreading the sponge additionally beyond its current population. So those two aspects, float size and dredging, have been removed from the proposal. And I think this is a good compromise that will satisfy the homeowners' needs and address the Commission's and Marine Fisheries Donovan's concerns. Harbor Master did provide comment today, just with concerns about this dash line. This is the extended property line out over the water, and that the setback from this, from floats, which in some areas is achieved, in some other areas it's not, is 25 feet. So this is going to be within that 25-foot setback to this riparian line here that it's like an extended property line out over the water, basically. And that is something that Chapter 91 will take a look at in working with the abutting homeowner to make sure that this situation doesn't result in any sort of conflict when it comes to navigation from both docks and piers. So it's just something that the Harbor Master pointed out as something that's ultimately going to need to be addressed between the two property owners if it becomes an issue. I don't think there's anything else that I have here as far as
Shellfish?
shellfish. Oh yes, thank you. Shellfish comments. So during the on-site, Donovan mentioned he's still got to do the calculation for the formula. He hasn't supplied that information yet, which is another reason why I think it should be continued. But that will be forthcoming. He did recommend a shellfish mitigation fee, but he hasn't had time to calculate it out just because of the recent site visit and changes. But he will supply that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions and comments from our commissioners? Go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
A question on, it's 11 feet, correct, from the edge of the proposed new position of the float to that?
No.
To this riparian line.
That riparian line.
Dash line, yeah.
And why is the float shifted closer to that riparian? Why wouldn't the float be centered on the dock extension to give a little bit more room off of that riparian line?
The reasoning right now is that the unloading area of the dock would be, or of the boat, sorry, I think it would be directed to the left on the page, and the unloading area would be where the dock is. The existing boat is rather large. It's about a 50-foot boat. So that you'll see there's an existing pile to remain out in the water, and that would be a tie-off pile. The owner felt that that is the best orientation for the boat. I did have this discussion with him. He would be seeking a letter of support from the neighbor. If that wasn't granted, the other option is to make the L go the other way, basically. So he understands that, he needs to work with the neighbor and.
Because the water depths are similar on both sides.
Correct.
Slightly better going the other way.
Yeah.
But that makes sense about the stern of the boat, the lowest freeboard, being able to load there. I get it.
So if that ended up being the final position of the float, this 50-foot boat would not extend any further than the edge of the float?
Correct.
It pulls up?
Correct, yes.
So that boat itself's not going to be getting
Yes.
even closer to that riparian line?
Yep.
Okay, I was just curious why it's kicked over like that.
Other questions from our commissioners? Hearing none, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make commentary? Conservation agent has recommended a extension because this is there are new elements to this proposal, and we have not heard from our shellfish constable yet. So I would motion that we see what are the date, Drew, for the
So this would
June
be
23rd.
June 23rd at 6:06 p.m.
I motion that we continue. Thank you, Drew. Motion that we continue this hearing to June 23rd at 6:06 p.m.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any discussion? Applicant?
No, it's good.
Now voting. Tom?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries.
Thank you.
See you next hearing. Now calling the 6:03 hearing for Nancy McSweeney, trustee 9 Ucantana, sorry about that, road, proposed septic system upgrade. Representative is Myers and Sons. This is an RDA.
Good evening, Darren Meyer here representing the owner, Nancy McSweeney, 9 Uncatana Road, Mashb. We're dealing with a straight Title V upgrade of a failed system. We have 2 existing cesspools in the rear yard. The proposal is to reroute the plumbing and install a conventional Title V system with tank and leaching system. We're on a small lot with a 4-bedroom septic. The only area that we really have to install this system is in the front yard based on setbacks to the wetlands. And a 4-bedroom system is quite large, so we weren't able to maintain the 100 feet with the tank or the leaching. And even with that, we still need variances from the Board of Health with regards to setbacks. We have mitigation in place on either side of the property just to help contain anything that might run off during construction. The entire system is outside of the AE 10 flood zone. That's really it, just a straight upgrade, so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Drew, comments?
Show commissioners some photos of the site. This is the lot here, 9 Uncatana. You've got bordering vegetated wetland back here associated with Dean's Pond. It's the wetland resource area. There's a couple of photos showing property from the road, the existing home, backyard, mostly pre-developed, pre-disturbed with landscaping, hardscaping, and deck. This is the area with the proposed leach field on the road side of the home. And then back here, this is roughly where the edge of wetland is located in this area here in the backyards. You've got mostly lawn going up to this embankment, which leads down into the bordering vegetated wetland. So let's see. All work is outside the 50-foot buffer to the wetland, and I think the setback based on the plan is 93 feet from the wetland edge. 93 feet. Board of Health comments. Septic design plan submitted and approved by Board of Health. No other comments.
Thank you, Drew.
Or no comments from the building commissioner.
Questions from our commissioners?
Are you replacing this with the same size septic system?
Did you hear that? He asked if you were replacing this with the same size septic system.
No, the existing system are two cesspools in the rear yard, so it's a compliant with Title V, whereas the current system is not. It's cesspools in the rear. What we've done is compliant with current Title V requirements for a 4-bedroom capacity.
Thank you. Other questions from our commissioners?
Yeah. I always ask, any consideration for an IA system?
Considering that we're not pushing the envelope with groundwater, no.
What is the groundwater elevation?
We didn't hit it. It's there. I kind of used the bottom of the test hole as a basis for my offsets and height above the system. But we are 6.7 feet above the bottom of the test hole. The groundwater adjustment in that area is about 1.3 feet. So if we had hit it at the bottom, we would still be 5.4 feet above groundwater.
So you're down 132 and no sign of anything?
Correct. It's there for sure. We were probably just above it with the test hole.
All right. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion. This is an RDA.
For the application of 9 Yasatina Road, I move for a negative determination.
Thank you, Charlie. If there's no further discussion, we'll hear a second.
Second that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Now voting. Tom?
Aye.
Paul?
No.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now calling the 606 hearing. Joshua M. and Tamara M. Fox, 81 Lighthouse Lane. Proposed extension of existing pier, ramp and float. The representative is Falmouth Engineering, and this is an NOI.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Michael Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. The applicant has a property located at number 81 Lighthouse Lane. It has water frontage and an existing licensed dock, which consists of a pier, ramp, and float. And it's in the upper reaches of Shoestring Bay. And the applicant has significant experience on the waterway, and it's a local problem of water depth. And the application in this case is an effort to try to extend the dock to a place where he can get somewhat deeper water at low tide. So if you look on the plan up on the screen, you'll see the existing pier, ramp, and float, and then shaded in a tan color is the extension. The wetland resources include land under water body. There's a band of salt marsh. Then there's a fairly steep slope that is a coastal bank, and then you get up to the upland. This is an application that was filed concurrently with the neighbor just above. That's why you see two docks, and they're friends and neighbors, and they made a decision to apply concurrently. And when they, prior to submitting the application, they did do some due diligence, and it included having a meeting with the harbor master to make sure that he did not have concerns with extension of this dock. And the basic criteria the harbor master had to limit any concerns for navigation he would have is to not project out seaward of a dashed line that if, can that be zoomed back?
Yeah.
That dashed line represents a line connecting two adjacent existing docks. You can see the one at the bottom right, there's a float that we surveyed, and it goes across and up off the page to another dock, which is beyond these properties, and he had indicated to try not to project out past the line. Well, you can see we did project out past the line, and I'll get to that in a minute. So we designed the plan and we submitted the application, and there were some comments, one of which was, you crossed the line. But it was a, you know, a minor extension beyond the line, and we wanted to see if it was of significant concern. And he did have a concern, and it wasn't really warranted to try to convince him not to cross the line because the water depth doesn't appreciably deepen. So my client has made a decision to pull back on the structure so that his float doesn't cross the line, which is about 8 feet, 7 to 8 feet. Just today, we got comments from the Division of Marine Fisheries later in the afternoon, and they had no significant concerns other than one that we expected, which was that they were concerned about the float's proximity to the substrate at low tide, and they recommended that the float be retrofitted with float stops so that the buoyancy on the bottom of the float that supports the float would not get closer to the bottom than it would maintain an 18-inch separation from the bottom. I think Drew, you may know, but Drew would certainly, I think, concur that there's no viable shellfish habitat here. I believe the shellfish warden did comment that it's not viable shellfish, so there's no potential impacts to shellfish if it's not a viable shellfish habitat. This does get the water depth boat in slightly deeper water, and that's the goal of the application. So one other comment the harbor master made was relative to the common riparian line between the two, the property line between the two properties. If you were to extend the common property line between the two properties, we wouldn't be maintaining the 25-foot separation. And you had a project just prior to this one where that discussion came up. These property owners are friends and neighbors, and the process generally is to get what we call a letter of no objection from the neighbor, acknowledging that the new extended dock is in a location that would be less than 25 feet from a projection of the property line. And generally, if the neighbors has no objection, he'll sign a letter that says he has no objection. And that's fully the expectation here. In fact, the neighbor's here, and his application's next. So this is sort of a joint effort. So we will get that letter. We need it for Chapter 91, so we will eventually get it. And if you want to make it a condition to get a copy of that, we're happy to provide you with a copy.
And probably an updated plan that shows a dock in the position that your
Yes, I was
clients
going to say, I think that sums up my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions, but I'm hopeful that since there doesn't seem to be significant concerns, at least from staff and harbor master and shellfish warden, that we could revise the plans to pull it back across the line, add the float stops. In the interest of time, if the commission has no other concerns, we would hope you could close and issue with a condition that we submit a revised plan.
Drew, comments?
Just a quick question, because I see on the plan, you've got the 2 piles associated on where the float connects to the ramp.
Yep.
But I don't see any illustrated on the seaward side. Is that going to be 1 pile or 2 piles, one at each corner? I just didn't see anything on this end here.
Well,
You may have mentioned it in your narrative, and I apologize.
no,
if
I didn't
recollect,
mention it in my narrative. Our original thought was to secure it on that end. I want to talk to the dock builder. We may want to reconfigure those pilings to have one on the backside and one on the
Opposite.
very end. The boat will tie to the 20-foot side, so you're likely to see a pile adjustment there as well with the revised plan.
Okay. So, yes, Mike explained the harbor master's concerns, and Shellfish Constable did say that he does not recommend a shellfish mitigation fee as the area is not considered suitable shellfish habitat. Sort of no impacts to, there's no existing shellfish stocks in this area, so no impacts to land containing shellfish. And just to clarify, it's referred to as land containing shellfish because the Division of Marine Fisheries has this area mapped as land containing shellfish, which means it has the capacity at some point, if water quality conditions improve, to be shellfish habitat, but based on existing conditions, it is not considered to perform in that capacity. It's labeled as such, but it's not performing as such because of the deep layer of muck. So this was rather last minute because we got Shellfish Constable comments relatively recently, is that I'm recommending that there be some upland mitigation in the form of native plantings. This would be, and I'll show you, this could be a condition if the commission approves the project. But just to show you some photos of the site. Upper left, this is the beginning of the access stairway going down the coastal bank. Upper left here, upper right, the extension of the existing fixed pier out to the existing float. And so it's in this area here. There's some barren areas of right around the top of the coastal bank that would benefit from some enhancement of the understory. So that's what I'm recommending. I would also recommend that if the commission approved, that they make a condition that the applicant work with the agent to develop a mitigation plan that would provide some enhancement to the coastal bank and to the immediate buffer zone to the coastal bank on the property as a condition of approval. Marine Fisheries, that's already been covered. And yeah, you can see, just going back to the site plan. Actually, I'll go back to the first photo here. So you can see these are the neighboring docks right here. You can see this how this one is really in shallow water. So I don't have any issues with the need for extending this out to get to somewhat of an improved water depth. It's obviously set way further back than the surrounding docks. So there's no question it needs to come out to get to adequate water depth, and that's only going to get shallower over time in that area. So I do recommend a close and issue with the conditions of mitigation to be worked out with the homeowner and the agent, and the requirement of a revised plan showing the float setback based on harbor master feedback, the addition of float stops, and whatever pile arrangement is ultimately worked out on this float.
Thank you, Drew. Questions and comments from our commissioners?
What is the number of piles I'm kind of confused on that. Right now, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
If you, the number of new piles is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Yeah.
And that'll remain the number. The only thing that'll change is the last section of fixed pier, the spacing between those piles on the end and the next set towards land. They're currently spaced out at 16 feet on center. We did them in even spacings. That's why it ended up going over the line a little bit. That'll get tightened up to, that last span would be less than 16 feet. It would be something like 8 or 10 feet. Or we may decide to just evenly space all the pilings. But the number of pilings is still going to be the same. The pilings that are securing the float are likely to be 1 on each end versus 2 on the back.
And I'm just curious, I guess this would be a question for Drew. How much mitigation square footage would we be talking for? It doesn't matter where the piles are, there's 10.
Right. I really haven't had a chance to, that's going to require another site visit just to kind of
See if you have
determine.
enough room to see what's
Right,
there.
exactly, yeah. But there is opportunity to enhance that bank and provide, so it's a pretty steep bank, so getting some stability there at the top of the bank where you've got mostly lawn leading up, and then the bank itself is very well vegetated. It's pretty stable, but it's also very steep, so it would certainly benefit from increasing the understory.
And the float stop configuration, we don't have that.
No, but the revised plan will have that.
Right. And the water depth is 1.7?
Based on mean low water, yes.
Right, yep.
And you need 18 inches, right? So those stops are going to be like right there. That thing's going nowhere.
Right. Pretty much. Yep. At high tide, of course, it'll be floating.
Yeah, it'll go up a tiny bit. All right. Thank you.
Other questions from our commissioners? Is there anyone in the audience who's here to make comment on this hearing? If there's no further discussion, we'll entertain a motion. This is a NOI.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to close the issue on, for Joshua and Tamara Fox, 81 Lighthouse Lane, with the condition that, that they work out the mitigation issues with the agent, and also create a revised plan for the agent as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. If there's no further discussion, we'll hear a second. I think I just heard it from Charlie. Voting, Tom.
Aye.
Paul.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Alex.
No.
I vote aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now calling the 6:09 hearing for Mark C. and Kim M. Bush, 87 Lighthouse Lane. This is a proposed pier, ramp, and float installation. Representative, Falmouth Engineering. This is an NOI.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. The applicant's in the audience if there's any specific questions they could answer. This property is directly adjacent to the one you just reviewed. This property currently does not have a dock, but if you recall from the aerial photo, or if we could look at that aerial photo one more time, this waterway has a significant number of private recreational docks on it. It's an active boating community, and the Bushes want to be able to enjoy the boating and have their own dock as well. I had mentioned that they're neighbors with the Foxes next door, and they currently share the dock, so it just doesn't, it's not workable for two boats. So what they would like to do is have their own dock as well. All the same fact patterns exist. In fact, it was Mr. Bush who actually reached out to the harbor master initially about how far out the docks could extend, which is how we got to the dash line. The water depths here are the same. The construction technology and the materials are the same. This pier will start from the upland. It'll cross the coastal bank. There's a profile of how the dock traverses the land. If you have that, it starts at the top of the coastal bank, and it makes its way down the bank via stairs. It crosses the salt marsh. You can see on the profile there's a separation of 6 feet to the underside of the stringers to the salt marsh. That is a DMF, Division of Marine Fisheries requirement. There's also a requirement that there be separation for public access along the waterfront in accordance with Chapter 91. So it serves both purposes, so folks can traverse the salt marsh if they're so inclined. And then it transitions down to a lower level, and then eventually terminates at a float. It's pretty much a twin of the application prior. All the same issues are in place. Again, we just got late breaking on the float stops from DMF, so we're happy to submit a revised plan with the float stops. This one doesn't cross the line, so I don't think there's any need to shorten this one. The goal is to get in as deep a water as possible. There is one other issue that I was hoping to discuss relative to where the dock starts at the top of the coastal bank. If we could zoom in on that, you'll notice that there's a little fire pit area right at the terminus, at the beginning point of the dock, right where the dock starts. About halfway down the coastal bank is a significant white pine embedded in the bank. There you go. It's probably at a 30-degree angle on the bank, and I took a quick look at it. It's potential to fall and pull out a significant chunk of the coastal bank with its root system. That's of concern of us and the owner, and I chatted with Drew about it today. If we introduced the dock going under it, we could have a potential issue with the dock too. Without regard for the dock, it probably should be cut. Unfortunately, it's doomed to fall over at some point. And it's a safety hazard as well, I think. It might be best to be proactive and prevent the root ball from ripping out the bank, and maybe flush cut this above the bank and leave the root ball in, and have to remove it. You'd have to hire a licensed tree removal company, obviously, to do this, because it's tricky. They'd probably limb it and remove it in pieces so it doesn't impact the coastal bank when they're taking it down. That's just something else I wanted to mention if for your consideration of the application. And I think everything else is the same. I'm happy to submit a revised plan.
True.
Yeah, just a couple of additional comments, and I do agree this was something that I noticed right away, and the property owner, when I went to take photos on the site, it's certainly just a matter of time before this tree collapses. All the crown weight is out over the bank, all the weight of the tree is in the crown area. So, and at the base, you can already see roots starting to get exposed. So, being proactive here, whether there was a project or not, is something that the homeowner should certainly do. to alleviate this hazard and avoid any impacts to the bank by the root systems coming out if it were to fail. So I certainly recommend having this issue addressed as soon as possible. And similar to the other project, Shellfish Constable does not recommend a shellfish mitigation fee, so I am recommending upland mitigation in the form of a 10-foot wide creation of buffer strip. As you see here, this is the top of the coastal bank. Again, very steep bank, and this would certainly benefit from having some native plantings put in and a 10-foot wide strip running along the bank, starting essentially from the fire pit area here and running up along this section of the bank here to provide a buffer strip where nothing currently exists. And then we would work out between myself and the homeowner and the consultant about what would be the most appropriate type of species to be implemented in that area. But that would be my recommended condition for if the commission were to approve this project. Float size, design meets the standards as also proposed, going back down to the profile here. The area of fixed pier over the salt marsh is proposed for through flow decking, which also meets our current required standard of maximum sunlight exposure, at least, or a minimum of 50% sunlight exposure when it comes to portions of fixed pier over salt marsh. So that has been accommodated. So it meets the standards of saltwater docks, coastal docks under our regulation 27. And as I stated, I recommend to close an issue with condition of mitigation plantings. No other comments.
Would the plantings be able to be positioned so they can grow into the job that that white pine was doing, holding up the bank?
Yeah, we can look at that section too, because that's something. Usually, if the failing pine is to be removed, that trunk the stump would be left in place. So we wouldn't need to, yank that out. It wouldn't make any sense to do that. But we can certainly take a look at. It's a steep bank. It's like almost like a 2-to-1 slope. So trying to get something established on the bank itself could be challenging. That's why I'm recommending the upland portion. Right at the top of the bank and slightly landward to create a buffer zone, just to add that extra layer of stability.
All right. Thank you, Drew. Questions from our commissioners? Good. All right. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this hearing?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Drew real quick.
Sir, come on up
and just got to give your name for the record.
Yeah, identify yourself, Mr. Bush, and
Mark Bush, 87 Lighthouse Lane. I was just curious on that stump when we cut that down. How much of a stump do we leave? Do we take it right to the ground, or leave a foot or two? Because I'm having a tree guy come out soon, so just like to have all my ducks in a row for him.
Yeah, I would try to leave maybe like a foot or so above the grade. I don't think you don't want to flush cut it and compromise, because it's going to be important that area remains stable.
Yeah, we want to leave the roots in there because that's going to hold it. So.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that was all I had.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion. This is an NOI.
I would move to add 81 Lighthouse Lane to close an issue with the condition of mitigation planning.
Thank you, Charlie. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Now voting. Tom?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
No.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you in person.
Charlie, did you motion for 81 Lighthouse Lane? Because this is, I would make I think I'll make the motion again just to reflect the proper address. It's 87.
Oh, wait a minute. No, it says 81 here.
We already, that was the first one.
There. That's right.
Yeah. It's,
Lost someplace. All right, it's the same motion. Make a motion at 87 Lighthouse Lane to close an issue with mitigation planning.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Now voting. Tom?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
No.
I vote aye, motion carries. Now calling the 612 hearing, Premium Contractors Group Incorporated, 49 Shore Drive. Proposed additions to existing dwelling and septic system upgrade. Representative is Engineering Works Incorporated. This is an RDA.
Good evening. Peter McEntee with Engineering Works. I've been hired to represent Premium Contractors Group for the upgrade of a septic system that is in failure and a couple of small additions that they plan on putting on the existing house. Their intent is to just expand one of the bedrooms, master bedroom, and the living room and kitchen. The septic system, we're in the A13 flood zone, land subject to coastal storm flowage. The sound is approximately 700 feet to the east. There's no wetland resources areas within 100 feet of the project. We're maintaining separation of groundwater with the proposed septic system, but are requesting a few variances for the components of the septic system to the foundation wall.
Thank you. Drew, comments?
First of all, I apologize. I failed to add the photos to the PowerPoint for this, but this area, if for any commissioners who haven't gone out to do the site visit, this is all existing lawn and landscaping in the backyard. So this is landlocked land subject to coastal storm flowage. It is outside of 100 feet from any other wetland resource areas. Board of Health comments. Septic design plan submitted and is currently under review. No other comments.
Thank you, Drew. Commissioners, questions, comments?
It's a standard Title V.
Correct.
Why not consider an IA system?
Well, I mean, the additional expense that comes along with an IA system is usually very significant. So, you know, the desire is to go with a standard Title V, yes. The existing, it's an improvement over what's there. We've got a pit there right now that's already in groundwater almost, so we're maintaining the separation to the adjusted groundwater, and so there'll be adequate filtration. No salt marshes or anything like that nearby, so.
And what is the separation from the ground?
5 feet.
5? At 2 minutes an inch,
At 2 minutes an inch.
or less.
Correct.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any further questions from the commissioners? Anyone in the audience who would like to make commentary? Hearing none, we will entertain a motion. This is an RDA.
I would make a motion for a negative determination for Premium Contractors Group, Inc., 49 Shore Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. If there's no further discussion, we'll hear a second.
Second.
Thank you, Charlie. Now voting. Tom?
Aye.
Paul?
No.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Drew, if you could.
I'm going to go to the part of the pre-post hearing agenda.
Thank you.
Where we have our health agent, Glenn Harrington, here tonight. And you should all have received a copy of this handout. This is kind of a discussion for Board of Health coordinated approach to reducing nutrient loading. Did everyone get this through email?
Yes.
Hey, Drew?
Sure.
You want to have Lynn go ahead if she has her comments?
Mine is very quick.
Sure. I wasn't sure if you were here, because I thought you said you were here for one of the agenda items. So.
It's on the agenda and it's the LCP update.
Ah, got it. Come on up.
That's why I was like, oh, yes, it is on the agenda. Good evening, Lynn Barbie, Surf Drive. I am here to encourage all of you and everybody that you know in Mashpee to attend the June 11th Natural Systems Workshop for the Mashpee Local Comprehensive Plan. If you care about conservation or the environment, this will be very important to have your ideas, your thoughts, your inputs. It will be June 11th in the morning at the library from 10 to 1, as we did with the previous one in May. And this will be a great chance to have conversations with lots of other environmental folks and people who care about conservation about the future of the town. Thank you. And I have flyers.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. So thank you, Glenn, for taking the time to come tonight.
Sure.
Fire when ready, Glenn.
I presented kind of a memo summary from there was a meeting. It was a working meeting with two of the select board members and the Board of Health. Actually, to go back a little further, this whole thing started back at Santuit Pond when we were looking at the nutrients that were going into Santuit Pond from septic systems and from other nitrogen sources and phosphorus sources. And in order to reduce some of the nutrients, select board member Andrew Gottlieb came up with a kind of a first shot at a nutrient loading regulation, and there have since been a few responses to that. And this what I presented to you was kind of a culmination of those three different responses from that initial draft from Mr. Gottlieb. And there were several thresholds where alternative systems were going to be required, one of which was to have all the cesspools updated to alternative systems, and also at the time of new construction, at the time of knockdown, tear down for replacement of an existing structure, at the time of septic failure, and at the time of transfer. And those initial thresholds we issue about 130 septic permits a year, and if those other thresholds hold true, we were probably looking at 700 to 800 systems that would have to be upgraded at those thresholds. So it was quite an impact to the amount of systems that would have to be upgraded. And so we're looking to get back to the select board and speak with them to see about these other options which have now come forth through our staff and through different research and on how we can implement this to where we're not impacting all of the properties at such a rate, trying to spread it out a little bit. And I think we've come up with some other options to do that. Some of the other things that were in the initial memo from Mr. Gottlieb was for nitrogen aggregation, where in Title V, nitrogen aggregation allows credit land to be used if you're within the same zone 2 to get to the 1 bedroom per 10,000, so either 20,000 square feet or 30,000 or 40,000, depending if you wanted 2, 3, or 4 bedrooms. And so that credit land would be attached to the parent parcel by deed. And what Title V allows right now is that if there is open space within the same Zone 2, it doesn't have to be abutting property, just in the same Zone 2, and that open space is going to be unused land in perpetuity, so that it could be directly cordoned off essentially by easement by a land surveyor and then attached by deed to a property to get additional bedrooms. And the proposal now is to prohibit the use of the open space and have buildable land be made available for nitrogen aggregation. And in doing that, it doesn't allow other building to be done on that credit land, where before it could have been previously open space, which would remain unbuildable. So in order to within Title V, there's, to be a nitrogen-sensitive area, you either have to have a private well on a property, be in a Zone 2, and there's another section of Title V where DEP was supposed to do a mapping project and actually map those areas that are going to impact the estuaries. And that mapping was never done. So within Title V, the properties that would have to meet that same 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet was actually never done for the estuaries. And so only the portions of town that have a private well or in a Zone 2 have had to meet those nitrogen loading calculations and the requirements of 4 bedrooms for 440 gallons a day per a 40,000 square foot property, or 1 bedroom per 10,000. So what I had proposed and added to this is to have the whole town be considered a nitrogen-sensitive area, so that it levels the playing field as far as all the properties have to meet the nitrogen loading requirement. And these other thresholds that I talked about, as far as the cesspools being upgraded to IA systems, or knockdown, tear downs, or new construction, many of those thresholds will meet or are more restrictive than the Title V nitrogen sensitive area requirement. So that would essentially meet that requirement if the entire town were to be considered a nitrogen sensitive area. And much of this is proposed for the areas outside of sewer phases 1 and 2. Sewer phases 1 and 2, phase 1 is funded right now, and phase 2 will hopefully be funded in the near future. And the septic failures that occur within those phases 1 and 2, there are specific processes that we go through, and the owner can request up to a 5-year extension until sewers are constructed. But right now, that only applies to phase 1, and it will be applicable to phase 2 when funded. So, because in the document there were discussions about, are there going to be pumping schedules required for the systems, and are there going to be other agreements between the owners and the Board of Health to make sure they tie in and to make sure they meet their pumping schedules. And all that will occur if someone were to have a failed system within phases 1 and hopefully in phase 2, that these agreements will be made and have to be made so that the dwellings are connected up to the sewer systems when the sewer is installed in the street, and then connection be made.
Is there a provision for homeowners who do request that 5-year extension to extend that time if the sewer project hasn't broken ground yet?
To the 5 years or more than the 5 years?
Yes, sir. So let's say an individual were to request the 5-year extension on a failed system, and then the sewer project hasn't gone forward in that 5 years. Can they then request a further extension?
I think the board would have to entertain something like that. The way that the regulation is written right now, any extension beyond 5 years would have to be from DEP, because DEP is still part of the approval process for any sewers and any sewer extensions. So it would either be made to us or to be made to DEP beyond that 5 years.
Thank you. Did you want to continue, or is that you pretty much hit the crux of your presentation?
I just wanted to point out one other thing, is that this is strictly for the septic systems. We haven't gotten to the point where we've come up with other regulations to address the fertilizers or buffer zones to wetland areas. And so I think that those are very near and dear to our chair's heart, because he mentions it each time we discuss this. So that I think that the nitrogen control bylaw, I think, is the place to do that. Or if you're looking at, I believe this discussion was if you're going to put back in place your own nitrogen loading regulation and look at those other issues. And do you use the Cape Cod Commission calculation?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was associated with the regulation, yeah. That was the calculation.
Yeah.
That was used, yeah.
Okay. I think that's the way to go, because many other towns use that for their overall nitrogen calculation on the properties.
Right. As you know, that Regulation 30 had a standard of 10 parts per million of total nitrogen loading. Do you consider that to be a realistic target or threshold to achieve? That was one of the things that concerned me as far as just the feasibility of trying to enforce something like that. I didn't want to get into a scenario where we're trying to enforce something that just flat out isn't feasible. When you combine on-site septic system with stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces and fertilizer usage in lawn areas, all of that combined to achieve a 10 parts per million loading based on that calculation from the commission, from the county commission. Is that something that I didn't consider it to be realistic, but that was just my relatively uneducated opinion. So it's one of the things we're wrestling with.
For 10 parts per million overall, I think that's still reasonable. Okay. But the question that is, at least the big question for me is, what do we have to do to meet the TMDLs?
Right.
And that right now, with the septic part of it through the comprehensive wastewater management plan, where the phasing now has been changed. We had phases 1 through 5, and now we have phase 1 and then a 5-part phase 2, and which is basically 40% of the town that will be sewered, and then we have the balance of the 60% of the central and southern end of the town, which will not be sewered now.
Right.
And so one thing that, again, I need to talk to the select board about is going back to the folks with the estuaries plan and actually calculating or recalculating using the model runs that were done for the estuaries plan to try to determine for those areas that will now be sewered and basically have a zero net nitrogen, what number is that for the balance of the town?
Right.
And how do we achieve that? Can these IAs actually meet that?
Right.
And Falmouth went through and did an exercise with one of their sub-watersheds, and we're looking at needing to get down to the 3 ppm level of nitrogen.
Right.
And right now, there's very few septic systems that can do that.
Sure.
So that's for us, that's the bigger picture that we need to look at, because the more treatment you get, the more expensive the systems are.
Sure.
So there's a direct correlation in that. So that we're still looking at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone have any other questions?
I get a couple. Sure. First of all, Glenn, thanks for bringing this before us. I've been waiting a long time to see something like this. Traditionally, I'm the one that asks for all of these upgrades, why not an IA system? And more often than not, the answer that I hear is they're too expensive. To me, it's a no-brainer, but I guess people just don't want to spend that kind of money. Ironically, tonight is the night where thousands and thousands of people are coming over those bridges, and our population will now virtually double over the next few months, and a lot of the ticking time bomb Title V systems will be up and running, and who knows what's coming out of them. They can't all come out of the ground fast enough as far as I'm concerned. The question I have for you, is this your document, or is this something the selectmen have put together, or?
It's a combination.
It's a combination.
Yeah, it initially started with the select board member Gottlieb writing it up, and then we've added and revised it a bit.
Okay. What is the mechanism to declare the town of Mashpee a nitrogen-sensitive area? Because whatever that mechanism is, it needed to start like yesterday, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
We are just so deep into this mess. And night after night, meeting after meeting, whether it's your Board of Health or our commission or the selectmen, there are no ideas being specifically addressed. And it's like, let's wait, let's wait, let's wait. We can't wait any longer. Case in point, on Monday night, there was a member of the Sewer Commission that appeared before the Board of Selectmen in a public comment session. She had several different, very pressing questions, and all she got for an answer was, well, we're not informed. How can anybody not be informed as to what's going on in this town? We see it every 2 weeks. We have at least 2, 3, how many were there tonight? 2?
2.
They just keep coming. And some of them are 4 feet above the groundwater. Some of them are 5. I was kind of shocked at this one tonight that was, well, we don't know where the groundwater is. It's got to be there somewhere. I hope so. In our Chapter 172, there are 13 instances where groundwater is mentioned. 2 of them, Regulation 22 and 25, call for the protection of groundwater. So I consistently vote no because I know Title V, and I see it here as well, isn't doing the job. And I would be remiss in my duties as a commissioner to vote for these things. They're gone. I mean, they're fine maybe out in Central Mass or out in Western Mass where you're not as close to bays and estuaries, but in the town of Mashpee, it's got to stop. It just has to. And so my concern is, what can the Conservation Commission do? I've been wrestling with this. I've read this document at least a half a dozen times. Would it be feasible for the commission to request an open agenda item with the Board of Selectmen to monitor, participate, suggest, recommend, ask, beg to get the town of Mashpee certified as a nitrogen-sensitive area so that these particular regulations and bylaws can become a viable tool for all of us? I know as a commission, we can't control as much as you can, but I find it very frustrating every time I come in here and these systems are being presented and they don't want to pay the extra money. So I guess that's a question.
The question is, it is really a matter of the board doing it.
So it's the Board of Selectmen.
Board of Health can make that call as well.
The Board of Health.
Because where it has direct implication to the septic systems and how they're designed and installed for the protection of groundwater, the Board of Health has every jurisdictional and opportunity to do that.
What about a letter of endorsement from the commission to the Board of Health for that purpose? Like, yeah.
I'm sure they would entertain it.
Yeah.
What about if I were to make a motion tonight for the Conservation Commission to request an open agenda item on the Board of Selectmen's docket that will remain open until such time that the town can either certify itself as a nitrogen-sensitive area, or, this would be wonderful, some data could be presented that the water was getting better. I kind of think that's not going to happen, but I'm completely frustrated. I've only been living in Mashb for 3 years, almost 4 now, full-time. But this could go on forever. And from what I'm learning, it's been going on for greater than 30 years. You know, I guess the big question is why? Is it just money? Because I'm looking around this town, and I don't see money, especially with some of these projects that are coming before us, as being a problem. But when it comes time to clean up the systems, nobody wants to do it. So is that a feasible thing? Because I'll make the motion that...
And I'll second it.
That we request an open agenda item, just like we have like Red Brook Culvert. It's on our agenda every 2 weeks, and it's going to stay there until that problem is addressed, resolved, and everybody's happy. Why can't we have an agenda item with the selectmen, either as a commission or, as you say in this, these are shared responsibilities. Maybe we should all do this. We were told back in December, I think it was December 17th, to go do our homework, and we're going to come back after the holidays, and we're going to address all of this.
That never happened.
Well, they didn't say what holiday, I guess, but we haven't gone back. You were there the night. We were all there. And I don't get it. Why is everything stopped?
Right.
Because people are still coming in here every 2 weeks.
Sure.
And they're coming across that bridge tonight like there's no tomorrow.
Right.
So we have to do something. We just can't just look the other way another day longer.
Yeah, I have some
Go ahead, Tom.
questions for yeah, if I could just, Glenn, I've for 30 years I've installed a lot of septic systems, including with you, and IA systems as well, not only in this community, in many communities. And when I did a lot of research about IA systems and talked to civil engineers and yourself and others to understand what it took to keep the IA system working properly in a second home. Many towns and many health agents said that the IA systems did not work for many of these second homes because there was a period of time that the flora inside the system needed to get to the right point. Perhaps that was 6 to 8 weeks to get it up and running. And then they needed occupancy. They needed a regular occupancy for the systems to work. And they're in a second home community, like most of these homes on the water or in areas of these areas. If there's such light use in some of these homes, obviously those systems take several months to get working, and then people leave and they're not working again. And it was the reason that towns like Falmouth for a while, they said, we don't believe in IA systems because they don't work in second homes. Now, I was involved, and I was the liaison to the Sewer Commission a long, long time ago from the business beginning, because I was concerned about
getting sewers in this community. So on and off for a 5-year period, I went to the sewer commission and we watched all of the different 3 engineering things, and studies were done, and you're saying, when are they coming, when are they coming, when are they coming? And it was money, because it takes billions of dollars, and that's what we were told, that at that time, and this goes back 15 years, that it would take at least at that time $1.5 billion to do our community. So the thing is, these sewer projects are going to be enormous. The bills to our citizens are going to be enormous. We already know what some of those bills are in places like Falmouth, where they've done areas, including my controller, who is now on sewer in that area in Falmouth Heights. And the AI systems have gone through the roof. And the amount of clean water in comparison to a Title V system versus an IA system still is nothing in comparison to what sewering is. And it seems to me that the IA system, because it is really experimental technology, and because many of these companies go out of business, and you have to pick the right one, hoping they're going to still be in business. Most of them go out of business because they can't figure out how to make money at that. That you know, our push should be to as a community, all try to push towards sewering, and it seems to me to, you know, make people pay that extra $20,000 or $30,000, because it can be even more than that because it's filled. And not everyone in this town is wealthy. Believe it or not, the majority of our citizens are families and retired, and it's not that they don't want to, it's that it's not affordable. And I think everyone wants clean water. We know we need that. You know, if our country didn't have $27 trillion in debt, I'm sure there'd be a lot more money for sewering. But I wanted your opinion on the IA system as far as for a second home. Isn't it true that basically that those systems that the home needs to be occupied more or less on a regular basis to get that floor to work properly inside the tank?
As far as a specific answer to the seasonal home and how the IAs operate, I think the bigger question for us right now is, are the IAs still feasible to do the balance of the town to meet the TMDLs? Because part of you're talking about the overall performance of the IA system in a seasonal setting.
Yes.
And so they're not going to operate as well as a system that receives food every day. Most of them are mechanical, and so they have operating parts and need a carbon source, and the more constant a carbon source that they have, the better they operate. That's the straight thing about it. And so these seasonal systems have fluctuations in how they operate and with their proficiency in nitrogen reduction. So balancing in or taking into account those seasonal homes into those that are year-round homes, what is going to be that average nitrogen removal? And that number may not be good enough to get to our TMDLs.
Right.
And that's what we have to look at. And we're still figuring that part of it out. So where the phases have changed, and we're now looking at the balance of the town and relying upon now to see if the IAs can do that. The technologies have definitely improved through the last 10 years or so. And we did try to get Brian, our chair of the board, to come because he's testing these brand-new technologies on a daily basis. And he's really the guy and that I still have to sit down with too and figure out what the technologies are. But many of the new technologies are, they don't have the approvals so that we can use them on a wide-scale basis. So because there's 3 different levels of approval for the alternative systems. There's a general, a piloting, and a provisional. Well, there's remedial as well, but when you get to the general status, you can have basically the unlimited amount of systems you can put out because they have the testing data available to them and have the history to show that they can meet their certain requirements for nitrogen treatment. So some of the newer technologies are still out there getting enough historical data to prove the DEP to allow them to have these other general and provisional, and many are still stuck in the piloting where they're allowed 15 systems across the state. Provisional, you're allowed 50 across the state, and then general, when you get to that and improve the track record of your nitrogen treatment, then you can have an unlimited amount of systems. So that is an issue right now, is that some of these systems that will treat the lower nitrogen discharge are still in their piloting and provisional stages where they don't have the approval to be used on a town-wide basis.
And you know, there's the question of both nitrogen and phosphorus, you know, as far as that goes. Does the IA system, is that able to assist with that? Not really, right? As far as anything other than the nitrogen, is there anything else that it's able to dissipate, or by the fans, or by through the UV light and some of these things? Is there anything that another benefit to the IA systems?
There are more systems right now that have phosphorus treatment to them, but again, they're all very early in their technology and in their approvals. The one thing that that phase 2 really needs to happen is for the protection of the ponds, because even the IA systems don't treat for phosphorus, and it's the phosphorus that's impacting the freshwater ponds. And so that is really a paramount point to have the ponds protected, to have phase 2 go through, because right now they are centered and in supporting the freshwater ponds. The estuaries have issues with nitrogen, not so much with phosphorus, so that's where the IA systems are still a viable option, but are they fully feasible to meet the TMDLs? We're still going to figure that out.
Sure. And I had a question also about ozone, as far as, you know, the ozone being so effective on the base for the last 30 years in removing a lot of bonding with benzenes and all of this. Is that something, for example, that's ever been looked at as far as a way to do the same for our groundwater here in town, rather than on the base the way they've done it for 30-some years, 40 years, as far as adding ozone, oxygenation? You know, towards ponds and these kinds of things, if these oxygen levels are low and you have, you know, different things, is that something that's on anyone's looking into or not? I mean, that's not experimental. We've used it on the base for 40 years to remove like a lot of toxicity and stuff like that very effectively in certain areas.
Yeah, I don't really have a time frame to go with that.
Okay. But what is your sense on these IA systems as far as in the second homes, if they're you would still require that? You feel you would still require them even if they were?
We do.
Not.
The reason why we do that is because we don't tell people when they can use their homes. We don't turn their water off. We don't say, oh, you can't come down on the weekend.
Right.
So that's why if there's the requirement, if they want an extra bedroom or if they want to have some setback reduced where the board has required the alternative septic system, that the blower or whatever mechanical systems have to remain on. We don't allow them, and we fine people for turning their systems off because, again, we don't want to police to have people say you can't use your home on the weekends. We want to have that home and that system available for that system to operate. But again, because of the seasonality, do the systems work as well as a system that receives continuous flow? No, it doesn't. So that's what we have to look at for its overall proficiency in nitrogen treatment.
Plus, there's no guarantee that seasonal homes are going to remain seasonal. You have no, like you said, you have no control over the use of the home or the frequency of the use of the home moving forward. Just because a home is seasonal now doesn't mean it's going to be seasonal in another year, month, who knows?
Right.
It can change use very quickly.
Right, and the way the homes are rented right now, they could have winter rentals and then have short-term rentals through the summer.
Yep.
And again, that system needs to be on and operating.
Right.
And we're not going to police people to say they can or can't use their home. So,
I would think, there's property management companies out there that take care of literally everything, They'll rake your lawn, they'll shovel your driveway, they'll wash your windows. They could go into your home on a weekly basis and put an additive into your system. And I put Red X in our tank every month. Not that that would be the answer, but I would think somebody would come up with a program to offset the seasonality issue of these systems not working as good as one that's under a constant.
yeah, that seeding is what it's called in order to keep those systems going has definitely been discussed on a lot of levels. And I wish Brian were here because it's being discussed at his level, not so much at mine. So,
Brian would be a good company to have.
Yeah.
yeah, they said dog food, cat food, anything, really. Any of the organics that can be used as a carbon source can be used to keep the systems going. But it was never made it through the DEP approvals as far as the alternative systems for the seasonals. And I think it's actually, you can go to DEP to get a seasonal approval to turn your system off. We don't allow it. DEP may approve it, but locally, we don't allow it. We want that system on, because again, we want people to be able to use their homes and have us not shut their water off, which we would have to do if a system were to sit fallow for the wintertime.
Sure.
Other questions from our commissioners?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to come back to the motion that I made, that we request an open agenda item on the Board of Selectmen's docket for declaring the town of Mashpee a nitrogen-sensitive area.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will second it. Voting, Tom.
No.
Paul.
Yes.
Charlie.
No.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries.
Glenn, thanks very much. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Thank
Very
you.
helpful.
All right, Drew, take it away.
So we'll go through the updates. Red Brick Road Culvert. We had a request or inquiry from one of the abutting residents to find out, now that Horsley Witten has completed all of their data collection for conceptual restoration recommendations for repairing the culvert and what to do about the flooded bog area and the overall system in that portion of Red Brook. So we did receive an inquiry about when the sandbags would be replaced. So both towns are currently working to coordinate that work to replace the sandbags. And then, of course, sometime around mid-July, Horsley Witten will come out with their conceptual study to kind of dictate what they recommend as what would be solutions to the culvert and to that overall system of Red Brook moving forward. But it was something that, when I gave my presentation to the association, that I said that the sandbags would be removed to allow to have this data collected and the area assessed and then be replaced. So this isn't anything new. It's just a timeline thing. So that's coming up next is what's happening there at Red Brook Road Culvert. Upper Quashnet restoration. So I don't know if anyone had an opportunity to look more into the different restoration scenarios that were presented by Neil Price at the last meeting. My own recommendation is that I think that I would endorse that the commission go for the alternative 3 maximum restoration with some amendments. Like here, this is one of the input channels that was proposed as part of this maximum restoration. And I had raised the question about the feasibility of actually constructing this channel in such deep areas of peat. So with some modifications, I'm looking at alternative 3 as the best possible scenario, where you've got river rerouting to improve flow, fish passage, and cold water fisheries, while also doing the maximum amount of wetland restoration as well on the bog surface, and maintaining this connection to the K1 bog over here, where you've got a lot of cold water input, groundwater input in this area. So that would also be part of that cold water fisheries improvement. Now, I know that the estimate for the price tag is astronomical, but the good thing about this area is that this can be phased. We could start with, you could break it into 3 phases, literally, and start with the priority, which is improving the fish passage, which is the alternative number 1. And then as you get funding, and funding comes in, the more defined you have as far as your restoration goals. And I think Neil had mentioned this too during his presentation, that the availability of funding for projects like this that improve anadromous fish passage, improve cold water habitat for brook trout, particularly species such as the salters we have here on the Cape. There's a lot of potential grant funding out there for these types of projects. So I only mention that because I don't think the commission should feel handcuffed or anything to starting out with a lower cost alternative approach in lieu of these other approaches, alternatives 2 and 3, because you can, as you get funding coming in, apply for more grant funding, you can take on additional restoration, and you're not limited to one type of restoration here. It's really just expanding upon the top priority, which is improving fish passage and cold water fishery habitat.
So if we proposed alternative 3, which is the most expensive,
right,
then we would begin with alternative 1, move to alternative 2, just work our way through it.
As far as the construction phasing. So, we've got funding in place to handle the cost of all of the planning and permitting expenses. Getting to that final phase plan to do, to identify the full restoration. It's really the construction costs is going to make up the bulk of it. Yep. But that's what I would recommend, is starting with using these 3 alternatives and using them as phases, as opposed to just, individual choices.
Yep.
So. And I have the utmost confidence that we will be able to. We may not be able to achieve maximum restoration, but I want to try and achieve as much as we possibly can.
Sure.
And there's no better time, from my own experience, as far as the abundance of grant opportunities for projects just like this. Converting a heavily disturbed, altered area back to its natural setting or something close to it. This is what's trending in the restoration world right now. So, I have
strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we voted to go with this proposal, the maximum restoration alternative 3, when would the time be for changes to it for it to be made? If we're voting that now to aim for the stars, how do we then tweak it? What is the mechanism for that?
So that's what Horsley Witten would do as part of the planning and permitting process. You would gradually, be shown, I think it starts with a 25% restoration scenario, and then they work their way up to the 50% plan, and then you get, when you get closer to actual construction is when you see the more complete plan. But the commission will be involved in all of those stages, and if any tweaking is necessary, that's the whole purpose of breaking it up like that, is to, so each phase will be presented. It wouldn't be just, here's everything, there's no going back, there's no changing. It's going to be brought in gradually. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
And Drew, where does the people power come from in terms of the grant writing?
So that is something that Horsley Witten can assist with. There's also the APCC, which has already gotten in touch with me about some potential grant sources coming from NOAA for fish passage and wetland restoration. APCC, the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod, is a really great resource for local conservation commissioners in helping to identify and even apply for grants. So I would anticipate that we would get some support from them. And from our consultant Horsley Witten Group, and because this area is also part of the Mashb National Wildlife Partnership Refuge, State Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, there's a lot of resources that we can tap into as part of the partnership refuge to get support for grant writing, applying for grants.
Because you're kind of short-handed anyways right now.
Yeah. As long as you get the ball rolling, that's really, but yeah, there is support for that, so.
Okay.
Further discussion?
When would we vote on this?
You don't have to vote tonight if you want to wait till the next meeting so we have a fuller quorum. That's your call.
Quorum's
I
a
just
quorum.
wanted to let you know what my recommendation would be. So you can vote tonight if you'd like. It's your call.
We're missing Steve and Brian.
Well, we voted on everything else, so why don't we vote on it? That hasn't been a problem until now.
I agree with the vice chair. There's no further discussion. I would like to motion that we approve and endorse as a commission the alternative maximum restoration plan as outlined by our conservation agent.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tom. Is there any further discussion? Now voting. Tom.
Aye.
Paul.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Alex.
You hear me? Yes.
No, we heard you, Charlie. Alex.
Oh, yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion's unanimous.
Great, thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Bylaw Review Subcommittee, I'm going to send out dates to schedule our next meeting, which will be the week of the 13th to the 17th. They'll be on vacation next week, but I'll send those out tomorrow, and we can get that finalized. Johns Pond Milfoil contract has been reviewed and approved by Town Council. Surveying of Johns Pond and Santuit Pond to be done actually on June 1st, as I just heard from the consultant today. So fingers crossed that there isn't much found. Hopefully none at all on Johns Pond, and hopefully a minimal amount on Santuit. We found evidence of it. DNR did last year, at the end of the summer. So that just remains to be seen based on the surveying to see how much the extent of milfoil is on Santuit. But we do have funding secured from town meeting article that was submitted by our department to secure funding, and I requested an amount above and beyond what I thought would be necessary, because we don't know the extent of the infestation. Chopchake continued data collection and planning for phase 2. Local comprehensive plan, you just got the update for June 11th at the Mashb Library, the Natural Systems Workshop from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And updates are also available on the webpage. And I think that covers everything.
All right. Thank you, Drew. Is there any other business before the commission? Hearing none, I motion to adjourn at, what time is it? 7:48.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Voting. Tom.
Aye.
Paul.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, night.
Good night.
Tom, can I get some signatures, sir?
Yeah, sign it.
Yes.